Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Gloria, and today in this video I wanted to show you some of the items that I made with some of the yarn from my previous yarn haul. So if you actually check out some of the other videos on my channel, I did a whole yarn haul video with yarns that I got from like a mystery wool box from Cambridge Fibers Limited, which is a yarn store here in Ontario, in Cambridge, Ontario, in Canada. So I actually used up as much of the yarn as I could to make some different items. So I wanted to show you what I made in case it gives you inspiration for your own destashing and stash busting projects. So there's not a really particular order, but I'll start with this one. So I made this like extremely long seed stitch scarf. I think I did 25 stitches so that each row begins with the knit. So it's knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one until the end. And since it's an odd number of stitches, then you will also end on a knit one. So if you remember, this was a extremely large ball of yarn. I was thinking when I was talking through the first video that it would have a very nice stripe pattern, and indeed it does. So that's really nice. I love how the pattern gradients, the colors gradient from like, say, like a lighter, darker blue, and then what fades into like a gray, and then pink, and so on. So you get this really nice stripe definition. So I think I used up, it was about maybe between 150 and 200 gram ball. The yarn is definitely about a 5 or 6 kind of weight, like a bulky or chunky yarn. And I think this was like a really nice knit for me because we were watching a lot of TV, and so it's nice to have like a very easy project to do and not to think too hard about it. And I used, I think, 8mm knitting needles, or I think it's a US size 10. But you can look that up from the millimeter size, and I made this huge scarf. So I think it'll be really good for a potential Christmas gift, or occasionally organizations I know do these like drives to try and get a cold weather winter accessories for people who don't have as much, like homeless people. So it might be a really good option for them. So that was one of the things I made for it. I was really happy with that. So another one was I had some yarn. I had 2 balls of yarn, which was the Red Heart Chic Sheep by Marley Bird, and it had a purple and a blue. And if you check my other video, they have a little bit more details because I actually read the yarn label on that one, but I've thrown them away since then. So what I did was I made the Youre Not Alone crochet cowl, I believe. It's a pattern on Ravelry, and I really like it. Yes, it is a crochet cowl. We have these really nice texture stitches with front post triple crochet, I believe, or front post double crochet into the previous row. And so I edited it to make a kind of the stripe pattern so I could use both of it. And that pattern actually also originally used the same yarn, the Chic Sheep yarn with wool and acrylic blend, I believe, by Red Heart. So I thought that was a really good fit for this. It just so happened that I had that pattern in my library already. And then I also just ended it. It has a bit of a border with just some seed stitch border on both ends of it. And the rest of it makes this really plushy texture kind of cowl, so it has a bit of interest. Again, once you kind of get into the flow of it, after the first, like, say 6 rows or so, then you say, okay, like every other row was kind of the same. So you can kind of just figure that out. And honestly, this was another easy TV knit or crochet, I guess. And I really like the patterns, the colors together are very complementary. And I like how they work together in this pattern. So I used up pretty much about both of those balls of yarn, and each ball was about 100 grams. So that was really fun knit as well. Okay, another yarn I had was like this kind of alpaca wool blend, but it wasn't really clear what it was on the label, if you remember, but it was a very nice like goldenrod rusty kind of color. So I had 2 balls of it, maybe about 2 100-gram balls. So first I made this tornado cowl. It is a knit cowl, and it uses these offsets of like yarn overs and decreases to make this beautiful looking like spiral pattern. I didn't follow really the gauge or anything. This was a free pattern on Ravelry, and I'll link it down in the description below. And I also added like this twisted rib section on both ends to make this nice ribbed border. I like the look of twisted rib a little bit better because I find the V's stay closer together because it's twisted, whereas if you use a regular rib, I find that the V sometimes can separate a little bit if you stretch it out too much, but in this case it doesn't, so I love the way it looks. I didn't actually block this. This is just like the regular stitch definition because that yarn itself was, I think, just single spun or single ply. It was very loosely spun, so you get some amazing stitch definition with some of these, with this this pattern. So I highly recommend this pattern, and again, I'll link it in the description below. So yeah, I used up most of the yarn. I believe I used up over a ball and maybe a bit before I decided, oh, maybe the cowl is getting a little too long. You don't want like too much cowl. So then I had still most of the ball left. I started making some of these like cold weather headbands. So I just to practice some cabling techniques. I think there's just 3 of them. So here's one of them. I got these patterns are by Brome. She has a website, I believe, and there's a lot of different like lace, texture, cable patterns, and there's a whole slew of them for just headbands. She has like over 30 headband patterns, so I just decided to try my hand at some of them. I thought I was following the gauge, but you know, it's really hard for these things because they do stretch out over time, especially if you block them and the yarn relaxes. So you don't want your headband to be too small because obviously that'd be very uncomfortable. But if they're too big as well, then they kind of just fall off and they're not very snug on your ears or on your forehead, so it's not actually keeping you as warm. So I thought I followed it. I think this one might be good enough for an adult, but when you look at them, they kind of feel more like they're probably for a child. And I don't have little girls, so that I don't know if Kirk will wear headbands, but it's really fun for me to try these different stitches, these different cables, which I don't usually use a ton of cables in my knitting, but I think I will after this kind of practice. I love the stitch definition on from this yarn as well in these cable patterns. Don't you agree? It just screams like fall, like cables and knitting and headbands, and this brownish golden color is just lovely. So here's another one. I think they have a bunch of simple ones. If you want to just start early, you don't have to make all 30 of them. But they have some that are just simple garter stitch, or the headbands are knit like widthwise, I guess. So they'll go here, you cast on, say, more stitches, and then you knit until here. Whereas these ones that I've chosen specifically are ones that they are knit lengthwise instead of widthwise. I think that's right. So for example, I only cast on here at this edge, and then we go around, and then I believe I just picked up the stitches and sewed it together at the very end. So that's how you get the connecting piece of it. But then in this way, I like it better because you can adjust the length of it or your whole circumference a little bit better compared to the width one, where once you cast on, it's kind of like that is the width, the circumference that you're going to go for. So if it's not right, you have to take out the whole thing. Whereas, if I was knitting and then it was like, it's not long enough, then I can just take out the cast off and then knit a few more rows or knit another cable repeat and then cast off again, and there's like a little bit less work to adjust the length. So I will link those the headband site, or like I will link the site where I found all the headband patterns in the description box below if you want to try it out yourself. And then even after knitting these 3 headbands and this cowl, I did have a little bit left over, but I don't think I had enough quite to make another headband. So I decided to just add it to my my scrap yarn pile in case I want to make another scrappy project later in the future. And so the last yarn that I had in there was this Loops and Threads, this light rose beige yarn. And so I believe the Loops and Thread is called Sugar Spun, but don't quote me on that. Check the other video for the actual information. So it had around 3 smallish balls, around about 80 grams each of a ball. So the first thing I made was actually this. I believe this is a beaded rib stitch. It's very just open lace work, very stretchy ribbed scarf, and I used up, I believe, at least 2 balls of it. And I already got this extremely long scarf that, again, I can either donate it or have it on hand for like a nice gift for somebody. You just never know. And I think it works great in mini seasons. I think like the airiness is nice in case you want a lighter scarf. Like the whole thing is quite light. But since it is like quite long, you can wrap it around your neck more times. So that can also like add increased warmth during the winter time. I didn't add fringe, but I think if you like fringe, you could definitely do that to this pattern. If you're wondering like, where did you find all these like patterns? I literally just Google like 2-row repeat knitting patterns and then see what kind of multiples, like multiple of 4 plus 2 or something, whatever the pattern tells you to cast on. I like estimate it and then just cast on and go. And that's just the whole pattern that I do for the scarf. So this was again another really easy knitting project, and I used the same needles as the original one, but you can tell that the yarn is a lot thinner, so that's why you get this very like open, more lacy kind of looking texture. So it's really interesting how even if you have the same knitting needles, different kind of yarns, what the different results you can get. So that was one thing I made, and then I had a still amount of yarn left over, so I decided to use the rest of it and make another You're Not Alone crochet cowl. So if you notice, this is the same as this one. The original cowl pattern says you use one color, so that would be more of like this texture that we're going for, which is also very beautiful. You can see like how the, like for the even stitches, you can see how it kind of like diagonal and zigzag. It's kind of like a little bit of stripes, a little bit of knot. And then in this one, I actually did the stripe pattern, which was like every other row I would switch colors, and then I just carried them along on the inside, so there's only like a couple ends to weave in. So I don't cut them every other row, I just like carry it on in the inside, because thankfully there is an inside of the cowl. So you can kind of see it here. Here's where I had all my mistakes. This is like the rows where they're joined, so you just keep pulling up the non-used color until the next time that color is used. But obviously for this one, it's just keep going, and I just went until I ran out of yarn pretty much, and I just did the border and cast off. So this one is still, although it's still about the same size as the original one. You can see that they're about the same height. And the white one is slightly wider. It must be just because I think I used the same needle, but then also the yarn is a little thicker. It's not as like chunky and cushy. So definitely is really interesting how you can make the same pattern, two different yarns, and kind of the effects they give. So anyways, so that was those main 4 yarns that I got, and remember it's from Cambridge Fibers. You can check out my other video to see more details about the yarns when I got them in my unboxing video. And so hopefully this video gave you a few inspirations in case you want to do some stash diving, destashing. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye. Hope you have a great day.